Dulu dia Sabah, lalu sekarang Pate Hoyer.
Sino?
At the beginning of the movie, we see a delivery man named Karyo. He arrives at a house to deliver a parcel. As he steps onto the property, he knocks on the door and calls out for Mr. Care. He catches a glimpse of Care inside but receives no response. Suddenly, the door creaks open on its own, and Karyo cautiously steps inside. He looks around nervously, inching forward. Suddenly, the TV switches on by itself. At that moment, he spots Care, an old man, on the other side of the room, just as he vomits a large amount of soil. Horrified, Karyo freezes. Just then, a door to another room slowly opens, and a haunting voice says, "Please, come in." Startles, Karyo turns around, and when he looks back, Care has vanished. Suddenly, music begins to play from the open room. Karyo, hesitantly, walks toward it, and is shocked to see Care hanging from the ceiling. The scene cuts abruptly. We are then introduced to two sisters, Hanif, the elder one, who works as a tailor, and the younger, Isti, a college student. Isti informs Hanif she's joining a debate competition in Jakarta next week. Hanif beams with pride, saying at least one of them will graduate. Just then, they receive a call, and Hanif answers it. It's her aunt Sada, informing her that their uncle Care is on his deathbed. He keeps calling out for both Hanif and Isti. She urges them to come to the village once to see him. The scene cuts to Hanif and Isti traveling to their village. During the journey, Hanif recalls a childhood memory. She and Isti were returning home on a bicycle through the jungle. Isti, sitting behind her, urged her to hurry as the sun was about to set and their mother would scold them. Eventually, they sneak into the house, only to be caught by their mother. Rakaya, she scolds them, saying, "How many times have I told you to come home before sunset? From twilight to dusk, the spirits awaken. Do you want to be taken by spirits?" The children shake their heads in denial, and she lets them go. Later that evening, while Rakaya is working in the kitchen, the lights begin to flicker. Utensils kept on the side suddenly move and fall to the ground. At the same time, she experiences a severe headache and seems to be having some kind of attack. Just then, Hanif enters the kitchen, followed by Isti. Both are terrified to see their mother in that state. Rakaya mutters, "From twilight to dusk, the spirits awaken," repeating the phrase again and again. She turns and screams "Sorop," and then vomits a large quantity of soil, having maggots in it. Back in the present, the sisters arrive at the station, where their uncle receives them. On the way, Hanif asks, "How is Uncle Care?" But he remains silent. As they approach the house, the weather worsens and night falls. When they arrive, Sada hugs Hanif and takes them to Care's room. She sends them inside and shuts the door behind them. Hanif sits on the bed and says, "Uncle, it's us, Hanif and Isti." Suddenly, Isti says, "I have a bad feeling, let's go." But Hanif stops her. At that moment, Care speaks, Sinon. He is now standing and begins moving toward them, saying, "Before I die, help me. I can't take it anymore." Hanif asks, "Help you with what?" He replies, "Let me die. Forgive me." He then kneels. Hanif asks, "Forgive what, uncle?" He looks up. His body starts to shake violently, as if in pain, and he collapses backward. Just then, the doctor, along with their aunt and uncle, rushes into the room and declares him dead. Later, Hanif asks Sada about Uncle Care's wife, Saba. Sada explains that 10 years ago, not long after both of them left the house, Saba also walked out on Care. Ever since then, his condition steadily declined. She reveals that Care attempted to take his own life multiple times, but each time he was declared dead, he somehow came back to life. She says, "He told me to ask you to come here. He believed your presence would set him free and allow him to pass on peacefully." She then tells them to get some rest, adding that she will stay the night with them until Care's burial tomorrow. As Hanif and Isti enter their old room, they find it just as they left it. Later that night, Isti asks Hanif, why did Uncle kill himself? Hanif replies, maybe because Aunt Sabah left him. Isti asks, do you think he's really dead? What if he isn't? Like Auntie, Sada said, she adds, I don't want to stay here too long. Hanif reassures her, okay, the day after tomorrow, after the funeral, we'll leave. She then turns over and sleeps. Meanwhile, Kair's body lies in his room. Suddenly, he sits up on the bed. Then he is seen walking through the living room. The scene cuts to Isti sleeping. Suddenly, Kair says, Sinom, and is seen lying beside her. She turns quickly, but no one is there. Frightened, she sits up and calls out for Hanif. Hesitantly, she steps out of the room to look for her. In the living room, she notices that Kair's bedroom door is open. Fearfully, she turns to go back, and Kair is seen behind her. She spins around, but no one is there. Just then, she hears the flush of the toilet, and she rushes to confirm if Hanif is inside. Hanif confirms, and just then she hears a whisper, Sinom. She looks around, and suddenly Hanif opens the door, and Isti tells her that Uncle Kair room's door is open. Hanif goes to check with her, but finds the door closed. She comments, how can a dead man open a door? And then takes her back to their room. The next day, we see that Kair's funeral ceremony is taking place. After a while, Isti begins to suffer from a severe headache, and her nose starts bleeding. Seda notices this and tells them not to approach the grave. Later, Isti asks Hanif if they'll be returning home the next day. Hanif assures her that they will and leaves the room. As she steps out, she notices her keychain lying on the floor. She picks it up and attaches the keychain to her bag. She then goes to her mother's room and pulls open the curtain, releasing a cloud of dust. Just then, she spots a woman standing outside, but then walks away. Hanif sits down and gazes at a photo of her mom and dad. She then remembers the day her mother was on her deathbed. Hanif and Isti are frightened by Ruqayyah's condition. Suddenly, Ruqayyah starts pointing in different directions and appears terrified. The children panic. Then, without warning, her body begins to contort unnaturally, and the radio switches on by itself. Hanif rushes to turn it off, but Ruqayyah's condition worsens. After a struggle, the radio finally goes silent. As the children turn around, they see Ruqayyah standing, draped in a white cloth. She laughs maniacally, then drops to her knees, crying and banging her head against the floor repeatedly. The children scream. Their father rushes into the room, only to find Ruqayyah's head smashed and her lifeless body on the floor. Back in the present, Auntie Sadaya arrives. Hanif asks her, why did you bring so much food? Sadaya replies, for your stay here, and then asks, you're not in a rush to leave, are you? She advises Hanif to at least stay until the 7th day, as she has planned a prayer ceremony for Uncle Kair. Hanif reluctantly agrees. Hanif then asks, Auntie, what actually happened with Aunt Sabah? Why did she leave Uncle Kair? Sadaya tells her, after you left, Sabah fell ill, just like your mother did. One day, I went to her room to bring her some food. She was lying on the bed, so I tried to wake her up. Then, suddenly, I heard her voice behind me. When I turned, there was no one there. And when I looked back at the bed, she was gone. Again, she called out to me from behind, and this time, she was standing there, saying, I'm thirsty. The way she looked terrified me. She came closer and said, don't be scared. And then, all of a sudden, her body began to shake violently. She dropped to her knees and let out a scream. Her eyes were completely white. Then Kair came and scolded me, saying, I told you not to go into your elder sister's room. I told him I felt bad for her, but your uncle ordered me to leave. I left, and from that day on, I never returned to this house. Not long after that, Kair told me that Sabah had left him. Hanif asks, what's wrong with this family, Auntie? Mom, Dad, Aunt Sabah, and now Uncle Kair. Everyone suffered the same fate. Sadaya gently consoles her, saying, what matters is that you and Isti are safe now. Later, Sadaya is seen leaving the house. As she walks out, Isti asks, why isn't she staying with us? Hanif replies, are you a child who needs constant looking after? Anyway, I'm here for you. Later, as Isti finishes her prayer, the curtains behind her flutter open, followed by the window. She walks over and sees Kair standing outside, saying, Sinom. Just then, Hanif enters the room, and Kair vanishes. Isti quickly shuts the window and asks Hanif, what if Uncle isn't actually dead? Hanif tells her not to scare her. Isti then begins packing her bag, but Hanif informs her that Aunt Sadaya has asked them to stay until the 7th day ceremony. Isti says, but you promised me. Hanif explains that she couldn't refuse her request, and assures Isti that after the ceremony, they will definitely return home. As Hanif steps out of the room, a window suddenly rattles. She walks toward it, and Kair is seen inside the room. Hanif then notices her keychain lying outside. Puzzled, she shuts the window and goes out to pick it up. She glances around and Care is seen walking inside. Hanif quickly turns, but there's no one there. Curious and uneasy, she comes back inside and locks the door. Care appears behind her again, but when Hanif turns, it's Isti standing there. She asks, "Did you move the keychain? Come, let's have dinner." When Isti doesn't reply, Hanif comments, "Stop sulking, please." Later that night, as Hanif and Isti sleep, the door to their room slowly creaks open. Isti stirs and notices Care crawling into the room, inching toward the bed. He briefly rises, then suddenly ducks out of sight. Care slithers under her blanket. She nervously lifts the blanket to check. No one's there. Suddenly, she's yanked down and begins to struggle desperately. Care finally reveals himself. Isti screams and bolts upright in bed, gasping for breath, only to realize it was a nightmare. But then she notices the door is still open. The next morning, Hanif goes to clean her mother's room. As she opens a drawer, she finds something wrapped in cloth. A memory flashes. When her father died, the police had given this to Sada. She unwraps it and finds a tool inside. Meanwhile, in her room, Isti suddenly gets a nosebleed. Panic sets in as she sees the blood. Just then, one of her soft toy begins to move on its own. Fear overwhelms her. She begins to choke and collapses, gasping as something seems to take hold of her. Later, the lights flicker and Hanif is seen in the kitchen, preparing food. She picks up a knife and we see Care walking behind the window. She turns quickly, but there's no one there. Brushing it off, she begins chopping vegetables. Suddenly, Isti grabs her hand and says, "Let me cook." Hanif says, "Seriously? You're not mad at me anymore?" Isti silently shakes her head. Hanif jokes, "Don't make it too salty," and walks out. But she gets shocked to see Isti sitting at the dining table. Terrified, she looks at the kitchen and Isti is there too. Cautiously, Hanif walks to the kitchen. "Isti?" she calls. The Isti in the kitchen turns around slowly. Her eyes are demonic and she smiles. Seeing this, Hanif gets scared. Just then, Isti calls out from behind her. She turns and when she turns back, the Isti in the kitchen is gone. Moments later, Hanif is seen in the bathroom, splashing water on her face, trembling with fear. Meanwhile, Isti hears the voice again, Sinom. She now looks possessed, and a nearby door creaks open. At the same time, Hanif hears the same voice, Sinom, in the washroom. She turns and sees hands slowly emerging from the bathtub. She scrambles to open the door, just as she sees it's Uncle Care. The door finally gives way, and Hanif rushes out to her room, only to find Isti missing. Panicked, she searches the house. That's when she hears Care's voice behind a door. "I miss you. Sinom, why didn't you ever come home to visit your uncle?" Hanif tries to open the door, and then peeks through the keyhole. Inside, she sees Isti massaging Care's shoulders. Care says, "Sinom, come here." Horrified, Hanif starts banging on the door. She peeks again. This time, Care looks straight at her. Hanif falls back, terrified. She cries, "Please, let Isti out, Uncle." Suddenly, the door swings open. She rushes in and finds Isti dazed, unresponsive. Grabbing her hand, she picks up their bag and urges her to wake up. Holding Isti's hand tightly, Hanif rushes out of the house. But outside, her head begins to throb violently. Suddenly, Isti says, "40 days, Hanif," and then vanishes. Hanif, still in pain, screams her name. Isti reappears behind her and keeps on repeating, "40 days." Then in Care's voice, she says, "40 days, I'll keep coming," and smiles eerily. Hanif collapses, and moments later, Isti is seen trying to wake Hanif. The next day, Hanif tells Isti that last night, Uncle Care said he would keep coming to them for the next 40 days. Isti suggests they should leave if they want to survive, but Hanif reminds her that every time they've tried to leave, something strange has happened. Isti asks, "Then what do we do? Just wait here for our death?" Hanif questions, "Why did Uncle call us back here? Maybe this was all planned from the start." They then decide to search Care's room for clues. After a while, Hanif notices a wooden box on top of the wardrobe. She brings it down and opens it, finding an old book inside. As she flips through it, she realizes it's a book on black magic. Inside the book, she finds her family photograph. On the back, a message is written, "I decided to do the Sorop fast to make the people in this photo suffer until death. death. She reads further, if you wish to destroy someone and get what you desire, you must perform the Sorop fast. Refrain from eating or drinking anything except grave soil. The spirits of those whose soil you consume will aid you. For 40 days, your target will be tormented, then destroyed. But if the fast is left incomplete, the spirits will turn against you, tormenting you until you return to the soil you once devoured. Isti says, that means Uncle did the Sorop fast to kill our family, and he was tortured because he couldn't complete it. Hanif adds, that's why he keeps returning. He wants us dead so the ritual can be completed and his soul can rest. Enraged, Hanif stands up and tries to call Aunt Saida for help, but there's heavy static on the line and Saida can't hear her. Suddenly, a beep echoes and Uncle Kair's voice says, I will come, Sinom. Hanif is terrified. Isti shouts, I want to leave. She runs out screaming for help and Hanif chases after her. A powerful force throws them back onto the ground. Isti collapses. Hanif hears a woman's voice calling her name. As she looks, she sees Sabah approaching. Sabah says gently, don't be afraid, Sinom. I'm here to help. Hanif's vision blurs, and the next thing we see, both Hanif and Isti are back in their bedroom. Hanif regains consciousness and wakes Isti. Isti asks, what happened? Did you bring me in? Hanif walks out of the room, calling for Aunt Sabah. Isti follows and questions, are you sure it was her? Hanif replies, yes, she said she wanted to help us. Just then, they spot Sabah outside the window. They rush toward her, but she's gone. Instead, in the distance, Hanif sees Kair walking toward them. Suddenly, Isti feels nauseous and runs inside as Hanif sees Kair vanish. In the washroom, Isti vomits up soil and looks horrified. Hanif is shocked and embraces her, crying. Hanif says, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I failed to keep you safe. Isti replies, don't say that. You've always been good to me. You've sacrificed so much, working so I can go to university. I'll be heartbroken if we can't make our dreams come true. Hanif replies, we'll make it out of this. We'll be safe. You'll graduate soon. I promise. They hug, comforting each other. Later, around 3 a.m., Hanif hears the word Sinom. She jolts awake and fearfully walks to the window. As she draws the curtain, she sees Uncle Kair levitating. He says, I am coming home, Sinom. Isti says 40 days. Hanif turns to her, and when she looks back, Kair is gone and then notices that Isti is sleeping. The next morning, the phone line remains distorted. Hanif and Isti shout for help, but no one hears them. Meanwhile, Aunt Saida, sensing something is wrong, tells her husband, I couldn't reach Hanif. I have a bad feeling. I'm going to check on them. Back at the house, Hanif reads from the black magic book. For 40 days, the person you hate will be tortured and then obliterated. Isti asks, what did our family do wrong that Uncle did this to us? Hanif replies, he definitely wanted something. She then finds another photograph inside the book. She wonders, was it the house that made Uncle do the Sorop fast? It was inherited by Dad. He and Mom planned to sell it and move to Jakarta. In a flashback, we see Rakaya mocks Sabah for coming home late. Hanif's father interrupts, inviting everyone to dinner. Sabah says she brought food, but Rakaya sneers, your husband's business is bankrupt. You should eat at home. Her husband scolds her for being rude. Hanif asks, are we really moving to Jakarta? Rakaya replies, of course. I've heard there are good schools there. From the corner, Sabah and Kair silently listen, jealousy in their eyes. Back in present, Hanif storms into Kair's room. She yells, Uncle, if you want the house, take it. Just stop all of this. We don't need this house. If you want a life, take mine. But leave Isti. Let her go. Isti hugs her tightly, crying, I'm not leaving without you. Suddenly, Hanif notices something under Kair's bed. They quickly remove the mattress and find a collection of offerings hidden beneath. Moving them aside, they lift a wooden plank and uncover a layer of soil. Hanif starts digging with a shovel. Shovel strikes something. Hanif pulls out a necklace, then digs deeper and finds a human skull. She recoils in horror. Isti recognizes that the necklace is of Aunt Sabah. She cries and asks then, who did we see yesterday? They run from the room in a panic and spot Aunt Saida in the kitchen. Relieved, they rush to her. Isti asks, why didn't we see you come in? She replies, I came through the back door. Hanif says, Uncle lied. Aunt Sabah didn't leave. She was buried under his bed. He did the Sorop fast to destroy our family. He killed Dad, Mom, and Aunt Sabah to claim this house. She shows Seda the black magic book. Seda says cryptically, "The more humans learn, the more they understand the meaning of death." She asks, "Do you remember what your father left behind before he died? Burn it." As she repeats this, she begins chopping off her own fingers. Hanif and Isti stare in horror, with her eyes turned white. Sada says, "Sinom, I'm coming home." Suddenly, Hanif stiffens, then vomits grave soil. Panicked, Isti grabs her and runs. Behind them, Sada says, "Don't go, I miss you." Just then, the real Aunt Sada appears in their front. Hanif, trembling, asks, "Who are you?" She replies, "It's me, Aunt Sada." Hanif shouts, "Don't lie!" Seda says, "What's happened to you? I tried calling but couldn't reach you. I had a terrible feeling, so I came." She gently opens her arms. Nervously, Hanif and Isti approach and hug her tightly. Sada then sees the red book and Saba's skull and asks, "Why did Care do this?" Hanif then shows her the tool she found earlier. Seda recalls that the police gave it to her after their father died. Hanif explains that when they saw a figure resembling her, she had mentioned an object left behind by their father. Seda opens it and lifts the lid, finding a piece of cloth inside. On it is written, "Darkness cannot be fought with light. Darkness must be destroyed with what is darker." Hanif asks what it means and says, "How could Uncle Care do this to us?" Seda replies, "Do you remember the night before you left this house?" In a flashback, we see Seda tells the kids that she's leaving and has cooked food for them. Suddenly, they hear Saba screaming from her room. She yells, "You caused all of this! You made me suffer!" Saba bursts out of the room, jumps in front of the kids, and screams. The scene cuts to Sada taking the children with her. She says, "If your uncle did the Sorop fast, why would he ask me to take you away from the house?" Back to present, Isti starts having severe headache, and Saida asks Hanif to make some tea for her. While Hanif is in the kitchen, she senses Saba standing behind the window. She turns to look, but no one is there. A moment later, the lights start flickering. Meanwhile, Sada notices Isti sitting on the bed with her back turned. She asks, "What are you doing?" Isti slowly turns around and, in Care's voice, says, "I'm coming home," then suddenly leaps at Saida, attacking her and screams. Suddenly, the lights go out. Hanif starts looking for a torch. Once she finds it, she heads toward the room with it. But when she enters, Isti is nowhere to be seen, and she finds Sada lying unconscious. She tries to wake her up, but just then, strange sounds come from outside. Hanif steps out to investigate and sees the front door rattling violently. Suddenly, she hears a whisper, "Sino." She turns and finds Care standing right in front of her. She demands, "Where is Isti?" Just then, a woman's voice whispers, "Sinom." Hanif spins around, but no one is there. Care's body starts to contort unnaturally, and he collapses. Then he falls completely still. Hanif hears the whisper, "Sinom." She looks around to find no one, and Care has vanished too. She turns, and now Aunt Saba is standing in front of her. She says, "I've waited so long for you two to return," Hanif says. "It was you. You did the Sorop fast? Why did you do this?" Saba smiles and says, "Your mother always looked down on me because I couldn't have children. She made your father throw us out of this house. That's why you must die." She suddenly flies toward Hanif but vanishes before touching her. Hanif looks around, tense. Suddenly, Saba appears right in front of her, then vanishes again. Then, Isti appears behind Hanif, chanting, "Sorop, Sorop." Gradually, more and more voices join in. Hanif sees multiple ghostly figures, all repeating Sorop. Suddenly, Isti's body is dragged violently into a room, and the door slams shut. Hanif rushes to the door, trying to open it. She then senses a presence behind her. Trembling, she turns, but there's no one there. Suddenly, the door creaks open on its own. Hanif steps inside and sees Isti floating in the air, seemingly lost and unresponsive. A whisper echoes in the room. Hanif turns to find nothing. She pleads Isti to come down. Just then, she spots an old woman, but the figure vanishes. Then, a man appears only to disappear just as quickly. Suddenly, her torch goes out. She fumbles to switch it back on. Then, the whisper returns. Just then, Saba yells, "I am coming," and Hanif is thrown through the air, crashing into a wall. In a flashback, we see Hanif's father, Supriety, mourning Rukaya's death when he hears a door open. Looking out the window, he sees Saba heading somewhere. Curious, he follows her to the graveyard. There, Saba stops at a grave and begins eating the grave soil. Horrified by what he sees, sobriety is shaken. The next day, a shaman gives him the same tool we saw earlier. As he heads home with it, he spots Saba on the road. He stops the car, only to realize his hands are stuck to the steering wheel. Suddenly, an unseen force begins smashing his head against the car window repeatedly until he dies. Back in the present, Seda rushes to wake Hanif. As Hanif regains consciousness, she immediately asks about Isti. Seda hands her the tool and tells her that she's certain her father intended to use it to end everything. She explains that the writing on the cloth is a spell that must be recited. Suddenly, Seda is dragged away, hitting the sofa hard and falling unconscious. Hanif hurries to her side, trying to wake her, when she suddenly hears Isti's cries for help. She rushes to the kitchen, where the voice seems to be coming from, and finds Isti has vomited soil. Isti says, "I'm scared," and then glances fearfully in a direction. Hanif turns and sees Saba clinging to the wall. The sisters flee. Saba begins crawling after them before suddenly vanishing. They look around cautiously and begin walking slowly. Suddenly, Saba appears above them, crawling along the ceiling. They look up just as she drops down and the sisters escape into a room. Hanif tells Isti to hide there. Isti begs her not to leave her alone. Hanif reassures her, saying nothing will happen to you. You'll graduate soon, and hugs her. Just then, they hear Sinom. Hanif switches off the torch and hides beside a wardrobe. The door creaks open, and Sabah enters. She says, "Your uncle betrayed me by saving you both. Because of him, I've been tortured even in death. But now, it's time to complete my Sorop, so the torment can end." Hanif suddenly switches the torch back on. Saba turns toward her. Hanif says, "It's time for you to go back to hell." Saba lunges at her to strangle her, but Hanif pierces the tool into Saba's stomach. She begins to burn, and Hanif recites the chant. She throws Saba back into her grave, where her skull lay. Fire engulfs her body, eventually consuming her completely. Sada joins Hanif and Isti, and they all embrace, crying. Later, Hanif prepares to leave the house. Hanif asks Isti if she's ready, as Aunt Sada is on her way to take them to the station. Isti looks nervously at the locked room. Hanif gestures her to hold her hand. Suddenly, Hanif notices a woman standing outside the door. She opens it and asks, "Who are you looking for?" The woman replies, "Can we talk for a moment?" Hanif asks if there's anything they can help with. The woman answers, "I came to collect something of mine, a book with a red cover. You can't leave before the 40th day." Hanif and Isti freeze in fear. Suddenly, they hear it again, Sinon. Mysterious music starts playing from the locked room, and the woman vanishes. From all directions, they hear Sorop, Sorop. The curtains shut on their own. As they try to escape, the door slams shut. They scream for help. The final scene reveals Aunt Sada and her husband lying dead outside. And with that, the movie ends. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications